Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today, on rather a murky day out there, I'm reviewing a book on family law. The book will be known to quite a lot of people in the family law practitioners area. It's Hershman and McFarlane's Children Act Handbook 2019 to 2020. Now, the original edition came out in 2001 and written, of course, at that time by David Hershman and Andrew McFarlane, who will be pretty well known to many of you at the family bar. This book comes to us from Bloomsbury Professional Family Law. They've taken the title over and we've given it a reference, not really a reference, but a review title, The Definitive Reference Work on the Children Act. Always have a copy to hand is what we advise. Now, Elizabeth was the lead writer on this book, and she and I talked about it. It's not the easiest book probably to review unless you deal with this particular area of work, which of course I do. Let's look at the book first of all. Here it is, a paperback, and as I said, it'll be known to most of you. There's the front, there's the spine, and then there's the back. The interesting thing is it doesn't actually say who's now writing it. But I take it that it's a group of people from Bloomsbury. But there's the book itself. Now you can see, starting at the back, there's some shaded areas for the various parts of the book. But starting at the back, there is, quite interesting, there are some calendars, which will be very useful to you if that's the sort of thing that you are needing to refer to. It's in part 4, miscellaneous. There is no index, which is quite interesting. And then after that we get to the actual book itself. You can see the parts of the book if I work backwards. This is the part 2 of the work there, covering statutory instruments. Part 1 is statutes. And if we go to the front of the book, we can see there's the main front area. As I say, there's no actual name of anybody, so it's just Bloomsbury Professional. And there's an interesting preface to the first edition from the original authors. Then, of course, you've got a contents section that covers statutes, which, of course, are at the beginning, then statutory instruments, then practice guidance. Practice guidance is actually quite helpful, I think, for the nitty-gritty of practice, and a lot of president's guidance. And then at the back is the calendar right at the bottom. Then you go into statutes itself. As you see, you have the shaded area there. Then you get into the statutes themselves, and it works through. And what's quite useful is there are, as you can see here, notes to go with the relevant sections, which are again quite useful depending on what you're really looking for. This is very much a companion, in my view, to the Red Book, which is this one here, and other works. But of course it's a standalone book in its own right and will be of quite useful help, I think, depending on the actual problems that you might be confronted with a particular client. So what do we say about the book? Well, as the title indicates, it's a handbook that every family practitioner, we think, should keep readily at hand, especially practitioners tasked with providing advice and representation on children matters in the family court. Now, as you know, the family court has been relatively recently restructured. Obviously, it's had this jurisdiction, but it's now got a particular name. And children matters constitute, of course, an increasingly complex area of law, which this handbook covers, I think, with admirable thoroughness. The comment's been made that it's very important for the family court, which has now been in existence for nearly 4 years, to gain the respect it deserves as the safe specialist court to deal with virtually all family litigation. And this statement, of course, pertains to issues of transfer, for example, to the High Court itself from the sort of lowest level, the family court level. And that, of course, when I say that, I'm talking about the family division, and that will be the one based mainly. Sometimes it's in the Queen's Building, and sometimes it's up in what was the old Principal Registry. That's the Central Family Court. But obviously the High Court itself, the jurisdictions of all these courts have of course changed in recent years, with the unlimited jurisdiction, for instance, in the county court. That's changed the face of quite a lot of initial litigation proceedings. Now, further details are provided in the text, and it's not surprising that since the publication of the first edition in 2001, this handbook, as I say, published by Bloomsbury Professional Family Law, has come to be regarded as well nigh indispensable. It may be almost 1,000 pages long, but the fact is it's presented in handy paperback format, which makes it, I think, a convenient and reliable companion for hard-pressed practitioners. Remember, the stress in these children matters can be very heavy indeed. There's a huge amount of emotion, and of course, although we're dealing here with the Children Act, there is a link over to a whole range of other areas, but of course it's specifically about children. And of course said practitioners will also appreciate the useful commentary on a few key principles and proceedings that emerge from this text, and you can see those in the various pages as notes underneath. One example is the issue at times controversial on what is called open justice, which frequently elicits more than a little lively debate. It's currently a bit of a buzz phrase at the moment, but the key principle cited in the handbook is that open justice is a fundamental principle, and that certainly is right. Although I have to say I found that a little bit interesting, bearing in mind that it's open justice, but just about all the proceedings I do are closed to the public. But that's the way it is. They have to be, in my view, because of the nature of the issues we determine, and the fact it's not really of interest to the general public. Generally speaking, sometimes it may be, obviously it has to be open if someone is going to face a custodial sentence. Now, the general rule, of course, is that hearings are carried out and judgments and orders are made in public. The implication being that if they aren't, they should be, and that's been a campaign by journalists for some time. It's added nonetheless that derogations from the general principles can only be justified in exceptional circumstances when they're strictly necessary as measures to secure the proper administration of justice. And of course, when matters go on appeal, they do, certainly to the High Court, they are then in open court. And as has been the case over the last 20 years or so, Handbook's undergone annual updates. The latest edition provides what we think is a definitive, reliable and certainly current source of guidance on proceedings and legislation pertaining to children proceedings, based on the overriding principle that the child's welfare shall be the court's paramount consideration. It bears repeating here because obviously it's such a fundamental policy. And it's stressed further that the wishes and feelings of the child concerned are considered in the light of his age and understanding. And again, that's quite an important move forward, especially when you look at some of the content of the CAFCAS reports and the wishes and feelings of a child. Now, the book's divided into 5 parts, and it covers statutes, statutory instruments, practice guidance, and the final part of a useful 2-year calendar. Obviously, this is covering 2019 and 2020. Included are the fully amended text of the Children Act 1989, which I think is very helpful, and the relevant provisions of the Family Procedure Rules 2010, plus supplementary practice directions. They are all in the Red Book as well, of course, but this is in one place, and I found the notes to be quite helpful here. Let me conclude by saying this. As well as practitioners and judges, social workers too, and indeed anyone involved professionally in this area with children matters, will we have no doubt regard this annually updated handbook as an essential work of reference for them, and a copy of which should always be kept immediately to hand in our view. And the new paperback edition was published on the 8th of August 2019. Let's just have one last look at it. There's the front, you can see the cover there quite clearly. Then you've got the spine there, and then what you've got is on the back you've got a bit of stuff. It's very difficult probably to see that in any detail. Then you've got the shadings on the side. Let's go to the SIs initially, because there's a lot of statutory instruments, practice directions and so forth. You can see the structure here. obviously you haven't got an index, but you should be able to find what you are looking for by reference specifically to the index at the front. For instance, Brussels 2 is covered, I saw it somewhere, and various guidance notes, which I do find of very great importance. It depends very much, of course, on what the issues are that you're facing. As I say, statutory instruments in part 2, going towards the back of the book, very helpful indeed. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody involved for the production of this work. I think it's very good that we still get the work coming along, and I think Hershman McFarlane is very much a staple for the family law practitioner. Thank you, Bloomsbury. We're very grateful. You do make our lives much easier by producing these titles, and we're very grateful. Bye-bye.